Part 1, Getting Started. By the end of this section, you should have PyCharm installed with a virtual environment set up for a Python project. You also have the option to learn how to install, configure, and begin to work with Git and GitHub. I strongly recommend that you include this as part of your learning journey. So let's get started with installing Python. So all of the content for this course will work with the latest version of Python, which is currently Python 3.10. To obtain the latest version of Python, you have to visit python.org/downloads. macOS and almost all Linux distributions will come with some version of Python pre-installed, so it might be necessary to update to the latest version. To install the latest version for your platform, please follow the instructions in the course manual. Installing PyCharm. PyCharm is by far the most powerful integrated development environment, or IDE, for Python. I use it every day and can attest to its incredible usefulness in multiplying your productivity as a programmer. It is packed with many cool features, which I've listed in the instruction manual. We'll be using the community version of PyCharm, which is free, fully featured IDE. Visit jetbrains.com/PyCharm to obtain a copy. Follow your operating system instructions to complete the installation at jetbrains.com/PyCharm/download. It is also possible to install PyCharm EDU, but all the material in this course will rely on PyCharm community. You can find out more at the JetBrains website. So let's set up PyCharm. After you have successfully installed PyCharm, launch you to see the following screen. We're now going to focus on the top right corner where you're presented with three options. There's New Project, where you go to if you want to start a fresh project. A project is a way in which you can organize your code. This is where you should start. Open is for opening existing projects. You'll come to this to continue working on existing projects. Get from VCS allows you to create new projects by cloning code from code repositories. So click on the New Projects to open the New Project dialog box. Typically, PyCharm will automatically create a folder to house all your projects, usually a folder like your home folder /PyCharm project. The New Project window requires you to provide a name for the project by configuring following options. The name of the project, you can leave the highlighted value, which is typically Python project or Python project with a number at the end, or enter the words starting_project, or whatever name you want to use, you could use that there. The type of virtual environment to configure, select virtual env. Keep the main.py option selected. This will prepare a Python module for you to start working. You now have an open module in a configured project with a virtual environment. Okay, let's take a quick tour of PyCharm. So PyCharm is partitioned into four main components. There's a project view, the editor, the navigation bar, and the toolbar at the bottom. Let's look at what each of these does. The project view displays several important elements of your project. The project folder, including the file main.py that you've just created. External libraries displays your virtual environment. Any Python package you install will go into the site packages folder. The scratches and console section will include any scratch files you create, as well as any consoles you use to connect to external resources such as databases. We'll not be using these during the course. The editor has the following features. It's got syntax highlighting, which means various words are colored depending on the role they play. You have line numbers. Breakpoints are indicated with a red dot on line 9. These are used during debugging. Execution markers are indicated by the green arrow on line 13. Clicking on this will make the script execute. Feel free to try this. The navigation bar is right at the top, and it consists of a number of buttons. Run configurations are indicated by a drop down with the word main. You can edit run configurations to modify how the script is run, as well as to create new run configurations. The buttons on the right of the run configuration drop down invoke the selected run configuration. You can either run, debug, run tests with coverage, and stop a run. The search button opens the search dialog box, which allows you to search various entities, either all entities, classes, files, symbols, actions, and so forth. The IDE and project settings button at the end allows you to modify various configurations for the IDE and for the project. Right at the bottom, we have the toolbar, which lists various useful tools. To-do lists any annotations you may make in your source code. problems, lists any issues PyCharm has identified with your source code. Terminal is handy to run interactive commands and is invaluable. Python packages provides a handy way to manage dependencies. Python console brings up the Python console. The event log notifies you on various events. For example, if you have successful interactions with the VCS, software updates, and so on. In addition to the above, a project with version control software such as Git configured will also display a corresponding tab for you to view operations with the VCS. So let's start off with your first project. Now that we have PyCharm set up and you have a project before us, let's write some actual code. The first thing I'll ask you to do is to clear the file main.py and replace it with the following code. Please type it out so that you can get some muscle memory of what is actually taking place. This is always a good practice. Always type out code examples. So just copy and paste. If they're copyable and pastable, type them out. So here are a few notes to point out. One, use the tab key, usually next to the Q key, to produce indents, and PyCharm will replace them with several spaces. Make sure you have no spelling errors. If you're using the manual, please do not copy and paste, as I've said before, or it may not work due to the formatting differences. PyCharm saves your code automatically, so you never have to remember to do so. The file main.py is formally referred to as a Python module. This is a term we'll use throughout this course. You can write any valid Python into a module. Now that you have the code written out, we can run it by clicking the green arrow just to the left of the if under name underline. You should now see something as follows. I'll take some time to explain each line. Okay, number one, the first line is the module's docstring. This is a way to document what the module has, what the module is about. The module docstring must come first. Triple quotes are used to span multiple lines of text. All text within will not be executed by the Python interpreter. If triple quoted strings occur anywhere else in the module, they'll be treated as comments and simply ignored by the interpreter. Import sys. This is an import statement. It tells Python to include code defined elsewhere for us to use. Python comes with a very wide range of extra functions that make it easy to accomplish complex tasks efficiently. If we had to write all these functions on our own, it would take a very long time and we would likely not do a very good job. Have a look at the Python standard library at docs.python.org and get familiar with all it has to offer. If you are keen to make a career as a Python programmer, you need to master this. Def main. This is the header of a function. Functions allow us to replace a whole block of code with a single statement. Moreover, once we create a function, we can use it over and over again. In our case, main function does not receive any inputs or arguments. Stick around until part 4 to learn more about functions. Pound ask user for input. This is a single line comment. Useful comments can highlight important parts of your code. They're not executed by the interpreter. You can include them virtually anywhere. Name is equals to input. What is your name? We have 3 important items here, all of which are covered in a lot more detail in part 2. We'll work from the right to the left. What is your name? Is a string. Strings are a fundamental data type. In part 2, we'll learn about atomic data types, integers, floats, Boolean strings, and the none type. And in part 3, we'll progress on to containers. In Python, strings can capture the script of any language and are very versatile. Input is a built-in function used to get data into your program. It will capture what we type on the keyboard and will hand over everything typed up to the point we hit the enter key. The equal sign is the assignment operator. It is how we hand over what was captured from the keyboard. Name is a variable which we can use to refer to the data that was captured from the keyboard. At any point in our program, we see the name variable, we should think of the captured data or its state after being processed. Print hello name. The print function is the built-in function that writes to our screen, or technically we call this the terminal. It takes a string or something that can be represented as a string and places it on the screen. The string that is passed here is using formatted syntax, a special way that Python allows us to insert the variable into the string that will be printed. Together, input and print provide means to get data into and out of our programs. Return 0. We have specified that the main function has a return value of 0. This is optional, but we do it here because it is good practice. If name equals main. Another construct finally in Python and nearly every other programming language is an if construct. If constructs enable conditional execution. This line simply tests whether we are running this module directly. As we will explore further in part 4, the part under name equal under main under is called an assignment expression and must end up as either true or false. In this case, it evaluates true because we are running our module main.py. So the code under the if construct will be run. I like to call this the import guard because that is what it does, but I've not been able to find a formal name for it anywhere else. sys.exit main. Two things are happening here. One, main, this is how a function is called, that is made to run or executed. We call the main function and pass or hand over the result of a 0, remember, return 0, to the function sys.exit. Sys.exit. This is a function we'll use from the sys library from the import statement at the top. And as its documentation states, it communicates to the Python interpreter that the program has come to an end. Because main returns 0, passing 0 to sys.exit tells Python that everything ended okay. And there you have it. Now you have a clue on what was going on in that program line by line. I would highly recommend that every program you ever run in this course should have the same structure, including at least 6 parts. Number 1, import sys. Number 2, def main, your main function. Number 3, the main body is where the main action happens. Number 4, return 0. Number 5, the import guard. And number 6, sys.exit main. Now let's look at an optional part of this course. If you're skipping this part, you could go on to part 2. But if you want to learn how to work with Git, carry on here. I strongly recommend it because it's going to just add a lot more power to what you're able to do. Git is a very powerful piece of software which allows you to intelligently save the full history of your code as it evolves. You can also share the progression of your code with others and work together, seamlessly integrating each other's changes. Git stores your code in a repository. GitHub is a free web service that facilitates storing and sharing of changes made in your repository. You need an account on GitHub to enjoy its services. So, for you to find out how to do the installation of Git, I'll ask you to go to the instruction manual where I've listed out the different ways of installing this for the different operating systems. Now, let's creating a GitHub account. So you'll need a GitHub account to avail your code to others. If you do not already have a GitHub account, visit github.com and click sign up at the top right corner. Complete the registration process by providing a username, email, and password. And I think you'll need to verify your email. Now, this is probably the most important part. We're going to be talking about connecting to GitHub from PyCharm. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that you'll be able to work completely from within PyCharm to work with GitHub. So now that you have set up a GitHub account, we need to be able to create remote repositories for collaboration. PyCharm has built-in support for Git and should recognize where it is installed, so you should not have to think about this part. However, you will need to provide PyCharm with credentials for it to connect to your GitHub account. In PyCharm, click the IDE and Project Settings button on the top right of the window. This will open up the PyCharm Settings and Preferences dialog box. Select Version Control, then select GitHub. It should be empty unless you have done this before. We'll add an account here to control our GitHub account. Click on the plus icon, which is close to the top, under the word version control, to reveal a drop-down with several options. Select Login with Token, which will open the Add GitHub Account dialog box for the token. Click the Generate button to be redirected to your GitHub account at github.com. The page is going to list all the required permissions, so you should now be on github.com, and that page should list all the required permissions that will be provisioned for PyCharm. Click Generate Token, which is a green button at the bottom of the page. You'll now be shown the token only once. So you'll have to copy and paste it immediately into the Add GitHub Account dialog box. Then click the Add Account button. Finally, click Apply, which is on the bottom right, to apply the changes. Click OK to close the dialog box. PyCharm is now connected to your GitHub account, and we can now create and share repositories right from PyCharm. So getting your project into Git and GitHub. Creating a repository. Select the project folder in the Projects pane, then click VCS in the menu bar and select Create Git Repository. This will open your operating system's file browser. You should have the project folder selected by default because we'll convert this folder into a Git repository. Click the Open button and that creates a repository. Adding files to the repository. In PyCharm, you should now notice that the name of the file main.py is in red. This is a good sign as it means that your repository is ready, but main.py has not yet been added to the repository. Right-click on the project folder, which is right at the top, Python project, and go to Git, and then on Git, select the plus add to add the whole project to the repository. The file should now become green, meaning that it has been added but not committed. Committing changes. To commit the current state of the repository, we click the green check on the top right corner. That's indicated in the manual if you have the instruction manual. The commit pane opens up. You'll see some files that were previously hidden. These were project files that store the state of the project, and it's a good idea to have them in the repository as well. Type a commit message in the box. For example, this is initial commit or getting started, whatever you want, or something meaningful on the bottom left. Then click the commit button, which is blue on the bottom left. The files in the project pane should be now back to normal color. Click the Git pane on the bottom left, and this will show your project's history in the repository. Sharing your repository on GitHub. So everything we've done so far has been restricted to your computer. We're now in a position to share this on GitHub. Notice that your menu no longer has VCS menu item. It has changed to Git because the project is now under Git control. Click on the Git menu item and click the GitHub Share Project on GitHub item. A new dialog box appears with some defaults. I would recommend ticking the private checkbox, then type a brief description of what your project is and click the share button. PyCharm will create the remote repository for you using the credentials you provided in the optional Getting to GitHub from PyCharm section. On GitHub, view the repositories by clicking the drop down on your avatar and then click your repositories to view all your repositories. And there you have it. Your newly created repository will appear at the top. Now, suppose we want to push changes to the remote repository. Any future modifications that are made to the code, we can simply push the commits onto the remote repository in GitHub using the push button, which is a green arrow pointing to the top right. There you have it. Now you have a proper development environment set up to begin the joy of writing code. Now head on back to the instruction manual where we have some multiple choice questions. It's a question to check your progress and some challenges that you could try out if you want to get some practice with the problem. So the practice problems, the challenges are provided will help you extend the problem that you had and carry out some more practice tasks with using GitHub and Git.